All right, we are going to move on to another candidate for state senate in District 7, Stu Green. Stu,
Good evening.
welcome.
Good evening. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for the venue and the introduction. I appreciate that. So as Martha mentioned, my name's Stu Green, and I am running for state senate here in District 7. And I think most of you probably reside out of that, but just really quickly, if there are any towns that you tend to hit, it's going to be Grafton, Orange, Alexandria, Hebron, Bridgewater, Bristol, maybe Danbury, and Hill. But there are actually 22 towns in this district. It tends to be one that is rural and poor, meaning it tends to be at the wrong end of the funding regime when it comes to public schools and how we do that here. But I'll get to that in a second. I won't say I'm a native of New Hampshire because I was actually born in Florida and we crossed the line when I was 1 year old. And then I will say for the most important years, I was raised here in the heart of the district in Andover. I've been to a variety of public and private schools, went away to a variety of different colleges, and then eventually joined the Navy in 1999. I did 20 years, rose to the rank of commander, and in the course of that career, I did lots of fun things, including being an accredited diplomat in a U.S. embassy overseas. I directed a maritime intelligence operations center. I ran around in the desert looking for weapons of mass destruction. I've been deployed on multiple aircraft carriers supporting combat operations, and I've done analysis, counterinsurgency analysis. Weird for a Navy guy, but that's what I was doing for the senior DC Beltway decision makers. So I like to say that I know a little bit about leadership, a little bit about building relationships, and I have served with the men and women in our armed forces, pulling in the same direction, regardless of whatever political party that they were in. So I like to say I'm running on a unity ticket, but of course I am a Democrat because I align more with Democratic positions. But at the same time, I think I'm able to talk District 7. I mentioned we have a lot of Republicans here. There's a lot of Grafton, there's a lot of Andover and Danbury. Hillsborough and Franklin are our two biggest population centers, and those are pretty rough mill towns. So as a guy who drives, a diesel F-350 that plows his own driveway along with his friends' driveways, and I have a tractor and I fell and I cut and I split and buck and stack my own cordwood and my parents too. I understand some of the issues that these guys are going through, particularly the property tax issue. And that is, I'd say, right there at the top of my list, because as has been mentioned several times, we do have an inverted system, a regressive tax base. And my opponent doesn't seem to recognize that. He sincerely believes we live in a low tax advantage state. And he seems totally disconnected with the very people that he's representing. And I actually suspect that this may be the first time he's actually knocked on doors in this district, which is pretty interesting. Um, let's see. When I retired from the Navy, I became the town moderator here in Andover, where I got to put some balm on the choppy waters that are our town meetings. We had a pretty bad reputation, and that was too hard. So I decided to run for state senate instead, and that's that's what I'm doing now. But it is an education. I'll tell you, it's very interesting, this process. But my priorities, if we get in office, are to defend the Constitution. That's the first and foremost reason that I've run. I'm scared to death of Donald Trump and what he'll do if he wins. And if Kelly Ayotte wins the corner office in the State House, we have another problem. And the Executive Council and the State Senate will be the last lines of defense.
Stu, why you pause for a minute? You have 1 minute.
1 minute, got it. I think I can wrap up in that. The there are lots of other things I want to do, including helping veterans with mental health problems, with PTSD, among other things. But of course, defending reproductive freedoms is right there at the top of my list. I'm a huge believer in the pre-Dobbs world. It's been said many times, my daughter has fewer rights than my wife did when she was growing up. We can fix that, and I'll fight to roll that back. Property taxes we've already mentioned, but also a key to that is supporting public education. I'm a big believer in public education and rolling back a totally unaccountable and unconstitutional voucher system, which we've already talked about. And then protecting the environment is really big. And I do believe that the logging industry, which has been crushed under Sununu, is an important part of maintaining our ecosystem. Responsible logging is a thing, and it is very important. Talk to any forester in the state, they'll tell you the same thing. And I would like to help out with that. And that's one thing that I think I can really talk across the aisle on. So I'll end on that.
Thank you.
Perfect timing.
Um, our questions actually allow you to elaborate a little bit about some of the things you felt rushed on, but we do have a question that has come up, which is, what would you say to men who feel cheated or disenfranchised in the current culture? It
Yeah,
sounds
this is really interesting. I was talking about this. So if you hadn't seen it, I had a spot on WMUR on Close Up with Adam Sexton on Sunday. And while we were watching that with my friends, I brought up the fact that boys and men are actually struggling. They have been left behind. If you look at the numbers of, in terms of matriculation to like UVM, for instance, the ratio is way out of whack. So we've gone from a world where women were oppressed and not allowed to get into upper education to one where, for whatever reason, and I think there are a number of possible reasons for it, boys and young men are being left behind. And I think that is leaving them vulnerable to identity entrepreneurs like, frankly, Donald Trump, JD Vance, Andrew Tate, all of these, forgive my French, these jackasses who are taking advantage of a very vulnerable situation. So we need to do more and figure out and kind of dig in, why are these boys feeling so lost? What have we brought all of these other rights forward at their expense, told that they're toxic and that they're part of the problem intrinsically, or is there another way to handle it? And I think that we're beginning to open up the door to that. And I think I really appreciate what Kamala and Tim Walz have done, because they've brought us back to a center wherein folks that frankly look like me aren't necessarily, we have a space, we have a place. There's an example for masculinity in Tim Walz that I think is worth emulating there, and that's something that we can do a little work to try to repeat and echo more.
That's great.
Thank you. And you had started talking about issues that matter most to you. You mentioned education, reproductive rights, taxes, or property taxes. And I just had the sense that you felt a little rushed. So I didn't know if you wanted to elaborate on one or two more with your remaining time.
Sure. The property tax thing, and I feel like we've got a little bit of incestuous reaffirmation going on in this very nice crowd here. So it's a little bit like preaching to the choir. But the relationship between property taxes and the way that we anchor support for our schools to those zip codes is unconscionable. And this, of course, goes to the Claremont decisions and all the decisions that followed in the wake of that. We have to address this. I mean, we had a system with SWEPT that was beginning to address it. It wasn't a panacea, but it was at least moving us in the right direction. So we have to take a look at how we do this, because like I mentioned earlier, the Franklins of New Hampshire and the Hillsboroughs of New Hampshire are the poster children of why the current system doesn't work. You get into this negative feedback loop where property values go down, so they have to jack up the property tax rates, which means people are losing their houses. At the same time, it's not enough to keep the schools going. School like Franklin can't even hang on to a math teacher at this point. So property values go down even more. And then in the meantime, you've got kids walking the streets that are bereft. They have no access to trade. They don't have wood shop. They don't have music. They don't have metal shop. They don't have, any, even frankly, extracurricular activities that will keep them off the streets. And so the property values go down even more, and it's just this insane, inescapable negative feedback loop. And it is very, very important that we fix that. My opponent doesn't believe it's a problem. He's really, it's interesting. You'll see in the interview on WMUR how dismissive he was of that problem. He thinks that what the Republicans have done the last few cycles in terms of cutting taxes hasn't downshifted the burden to the poor people. And we can call ourselves a low tax advantage state. And all we have to do to be that way is to say no to an income and sales tax, which I agree with, by the way. No, I've been accused of wanting an income and sales tax, but I don't support that. I think we have many more creative ways that we can better fund this state.
Thanks, Stu. I'm just going to interject here that, yeah, we pretty much expected the choir to show up tonight. That's pretty much who got the invitation. But one of the really valuable things about a forum like this is that you all are letting us know what we can tell voters about you, right? When we go to knock on doors, when we talk with our neighbors, when we chat with people at, events, um, we have some specifics about what you're going to do for us, and it's really helpful to hear it. So
Love
thank
it.
you.
Thank you. And by the way, just real quick, because I know we're running out of time for me, but there is an enormous wave of attack ads coming out against me right now, which tells you that the Republican Party is scared that I'm actually going to win this election. And most of what they're saying, if this army that we've got here of supporters goes out and encounters people on the doors or wherever, and they say, well, Stu Green supports an income tax or a sales tax or open borders or whatever, almost everything they've said about me in these attack ads is 180 degrees out from what I have actually said. So it's worth telling folks, beware of your source.